Before we get started, there will be spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach in the video to come. The 1000-Year Blood War arc anime has given us a lot of amazing new and expanded scenes that have helped plug some of the gaps found in the source material, the king of which, in my opinion, was of course the long-awaited showdown between the Zero Division and the Schutzstaffel, which, at the time of recording, technically isn't even over yet. I went into the anime cautiously optimistic that we would get to see this, we'd get something like this, but the anime went above and beyond my own expectations. I hoped to maybe get 1 or 2 new Shikai for the members of the Zero Division whose abilities in Zanpakuto were mostly a total mystery, aside from Ichibei, since the series originally ended, but instead, we were given a great look at not only a couple of Shikai, but even a Bankai too. In terms of her design, the Great Weaver Shutara Senjumaru is by far my favourite member of the Zero Division, so I was extremely pleased to see her be given the spotlight in the expanded fight scene between the two sides. Her Zanpakuto was briefly teased in the source material, but here we get the full breakdown of both her Shikai and Bankai, kind of. The anime certainly revealed her Zanpakuto and lifted the lid on both of its forms, but we were left to speculate on exactly how they worked. In previous videos, I've explored what I think Senjumaru's Zanpakuto Shigarami can do, believing the Shikai conjured a thread which she can then use as she pleases, and the Bankai maybe went as far as to manipulate destiny itself. In the third and final video of this little impromptu mini-series, we'll be going over fresh, new details on the abilities of Senjumaru's Zanpakuto, both Shikai and Bankai, courtesy of Bleach EX, and as always brought to us by Bleach_KRKRK and Arturo Plateado. It turns out I was pretty close in my understanding of her Shikai, but the Bankai is far simpler than expected. So, without further ado, let's take a look. So, the new information simply outlines what Senjumaru's Zanpakuto does, confirming its name to be Shigarami, and that its Shikai form is the small sewing needle. It's revealed that Shigarami's ability is to generate an infinite number of reishi threads, which Senjumaru can then freely manipulate. Meanwhile, the ability of her Bankai, Shatatsu Karagara Shigarami no Suji, allows her to generate an infinite number of tanmono, traditional Japanese cloth woven on a loom, which she can then cut and weave as she desires. Senjumaru is also capable of teleporting between tanmono of the same colour. The original poster, Bleach_KRKRK, believes the underlying theme of the Bankai is that cloth has many different uses, and that the ability Senjumaru used to defeat the Schutzstaffel was just one of many powers, which makes sense. And so that's it. I was pretty much spot on with Shigarami's Shikai ability, but like I said, the Bankai seems to be a lot simpler than first thought, and it's hard to know exactly how this ability translates into what we saw in the anime. Regardless though, this is an awesome Zanpakuto, and I absolutely love how unique it is. Weaving and controlling threads and fabrics is such a fascinating power, and of course one that suits Senjumaru perfectly, playing into both her seamstress and spider motifs. I mentioned in my review of episode 25 that I thought Shigarami had shades of both Benihime and Katen Kyokotsu, two of my favourite Zanpakuto, and I stand by that, though I think, now knowing exactly what it does, that it's definitely closer to Benihime overall. It's another of these extremely powerful Zanpakuto that has one central, fairly simplistic ability. Here that's the power to generate an infinite number of threads, but it's so versatile that Senjumaru can do virtually anything and everything with it. This also confirms something else that I speculated on originally, that Senjumaru's golden arms have nothing at all to do with her Zanpakuto. They're clearly a man-made invention designed to help facilitate the abilities of her blade, as we'll see a little later on when she battles Uryu. Speaking of which, let's now take a look at exactly how Shigarami was used in both the source material and the anime to see if we can glean an even clearer picture of its power. While Shigarami was only really explained in the anime, we do actually see its Shikai in action in the source material when Senjumaru kills Nyanzol. She moves so quickly that we don't even see her blade transform, nor do we even see its ability actually being used. A single thread dangles from Nyanzol himself as Senjumaru reveals that she's already rewoven his outfit, turning it into a fatal trap. We see that in the blink of an eye, Nyanzol's gown now bears the insignia of the Zero Division, and he's impaled from within his own uniform, enormous spikes piercing his body from all angles, killing him instantly and gruesomely. Already that's pretty crazy. Using her Shikai, and without even being noticed, Senjumaru kills a sternritter in a single move. So that's one power right there. The ability to weave and transform an enemy's garb to her liking, using it to brutally end their life. This is exactly what I mean when I talk about a Zanpakuto with a simple ability at its core, which then spirals outwards almost limitlessly. Being able to rework an enemy's clothing is just one branch of what Shigarami can do, but even then it brings up so many potential questions and options for the future. Can Senjumaru freely alter the properties of anyone's clothing? For example, could she remake an ally's outfit in the middle of battle to provide them with a greater defense? Could she continuously reweave her own clothing in the same way? How many outfits can she transform at once? We actually see later on that Shigarami seems to be able to multiply. Senjumaru is seen holding numerous sewing needles at points, so I wonder if she could potentially use that power as many times as she is capable of doing so, perhaps once per arm. By the way, if this speculation sounds familiar to you, well, that's because it's very similar to how you have to discuss Kisuke Urahara's Bankai Kanon Biraki Benehime Aratame. That very simple nexus point, that very simple ability that then blossoms outwards into limitless capabilities. Later, when Senjumaru is rushed by Gerard, we see her attempt to wield Shigarami in its sealed state, a giant sewing needle. Much like the other members of the Zero Division, the sealed state of her Zanpakuto takes the form of an oversized version of an object associated with her powers. However, Gerard simply shatters the blade in an instant, which is also kind of weird. That seems oddly fragile for a sealed Zanpakuto. Now, admittedly, I know that this isn't the real Senjumaru, but if the sealed version of her Zanpakuto was truly obliterated like that in a single hit, I think that would probably be very bad news for her. However, speaking of the real Senjumaru, when she reveals herself, the entire surrounding backdrop unravels around the sternritter, huge strips of cloth lifting upwards as the ruse is exposed. And knowing what we do now, thanks to this new information, I have to ask, is this also her Bankai? Is this some kind of component or lesser version of her Bankai? I don't think it is, since, you know, the other Zero Division members are all alive and well, and the Blood Oath seal clearly hasn't been broken yet, but you have to admit, these huge tapestries do look kind of similar. If not her Bankai, then I wonder how she actually accomplished this incredible feat. Presumably before the battle took place, using her Shikai instead, Senjumaru wove these fabrics and then hung them around the palace. I have no idea how she's able to create essentially a perfect illusion, considering the fake Senjumaru is outright killed and the floating cities are all destroyed by Lille in a very convincing manner, but she managed it somehow. I know it doesn't work based on what we know about how the Bankai is activated, what it takes to activate the Bankai, but it definitely would make more sense, in my opinion, for this to be a component of her Bankai, an enormous, huge-scale illusion that's totally infallible, that has surrounded the Schutzstaffel, brought to life on huge strips of cloth. In my opinion, based on what we know of her Shikai, despite how versatile and incredible the possibilities of Shigarami are, this feels like it might be a little too much for just a Shikai to me. Up next, however, we see Senjumaru battling Uryu and get a great look at more of what Shigarami is capable of. Senjumaru duels Uryu up close first of all, attempting to strike him with her needles. Again, she's wielding more than one here, so I'm not sure how that works. As I mentioned earlier, is her Shikai capable of multiplying itself to help her achieve her goals? Considering Senjumaru never quite successfully impales anyone with her needles, I wonder what kind of an effect they'd have if they managed to land. Uryu leaps into the sky above and unleashes Licht Regen upon Senjumaru, but she acts quickly. Here we see the way her golden arms work in conjunction with her Zanpakuto, helping to amplify its abilities. Her skeletal hands entwine, reaching up towards the sky before their fingers elongate massively, producing a framework above her head. Senjumaru then weaves her threads around the frame, stitching together an umbrella in incredible speed, both blocking and even catching some of Uryu's arrows on its red surface. And so here we have another branch ability of Shigarami Shikai, defensive capabilities. With her infinite thread, Senjumaru weaves an umbrella capable of withstanding Uryu's Licht Regen with no difficulty whatsoever. It's interesting that by spinning the umbrella rapidly, Senjumaru is capable of keeping some of Uryu's arrows in her grasp before firing them back at him, seemingly turning them into reishi threads as well. So it's more than just simple defense, it's a reflective power too. When the rest of the Schutzstaffel are revived and the battle continues, Senjumaru finds herself fighting Gerard once again. The sternritter moves to immediately attack her, but stabs only a crudely made doll. Presumably this is something she put together hastily with her Shikai in the time it took for the battles to be set up, but again, this kind of ability is crazy. Gerard is admittedly an attack first, ask questions later kind of character, but still he doesn't notice the swap at all until he's already fallen for it. I wonder if this is a much faster, lesser version of the illusion she set up at the very start of the battle. Clearly, that fake version of herself was considerably more elaborate, and she had a lot more time to prepare it as well. Interestingly, we see Senjumaru standing in front of Gerard just before he attacks. Was this always a doll, or did she make the switch while he was still watching the Cage of Life warp around them? If the latter is true, that's even more impressive. The moment she manages to bring Gerard to the ground, Senjumaru quickly uses her needles to pin him down, binding him to the tree trunk with several crimson threads. And while Gerard does eventually break free, it takes him a little while, and were it not for his, shall we say, special heart, Senjumaru might have been able to kill him extremely quickly. I do wonder why she never tried to remake their clothes again, considering how effective that was against Nyanzol. The key takeaway here, though, is that in this short space of time, Senjumaru has demonstrated a full range of branching abilities for Shigarami. She's able to use it offensively, as we see against Nyanzol, and in the way she deflects Uryu's attacks. She's also able to protect herself with it, as we see when she creates her umbrella. Thirdly, she's capable of using it to trick her enemies, as shown by the doll, and finally, she can bind her enemies in place as well. This is the perfect demonstration of how many uses this Zanpakuto could theoretically have. Speaking of which, there's one additional point I'd like to look at briefly. Does her Zanpakuto also have the ability to heal as well? It does seem to be the one thing it's currently missing. When Oetsu is blasted by Leal, Senjumaru sweeps him away and saves his life with what looks to be a pretty miraculous ability. She produces what I think are basically small balls of cotton, placing them inside Oetsu's gaping wounds. The cotton then expands, completely filling the bullet holes and seemingly restoring Oetsu's flesh itself. And bear in mind, certainly the shot that went through Oetsu's chest could have easily been a killing blow. But after this process, he's totally back to normal again, despite just teetering on the brink of death. As far as healing goes, it is remarkable, and it works extraordinarily quickly as well. To be honest though, I don't think this is a part of Shigarami's ability set. I think this simply stems from Senjumaru's overarching control over fabrics and cloth in general. And speaking on that, it's also possible that her earlier illusion, where she completely built this fake world and this fake version of herself to dupe the sternritter, has nothing to do with Shigarami either. Senjumaru can simply control fabrics, whatever that really means. While we don't really understand the scope of that power nor its definition, I don't see why it would be out of the realm of believability for a character of her caliber to, I don't know, be able to change the nature of the very world around her into fabric. It sounds crazy, but that's the level we're dealing with here. It's just a thought, but to be honest, something of this scale, something this elaborate, it would make more sense for it to be an innate godly power of her own than simply being relegated to her Shikai, since we're pretty certain it's not her Bankai. Regardless, even if the healing isn't a part of her Zanpakuto, it's a healing prowess that would put most skilled healers in Bleach to shame. As for her Bankai Shatatsu Karagara Shigarami no Suji, it seems it doesn't do anything so elaborate as weave fate after all. But can we really be blamed for thinking that? Each member of the Schutzstaffel is killed and imprisoned by something that explicitly references either their future defeats or just something that will occur in their near future. Lille is surrounded by mirrors, Askin is impaled, Pernida is devoured, Gerard is frozen, Hashwalth is incinerated, while Uryu seems to reference the Alsvalen and him being drawn to the Vandenreich. However, it seems like this isn't to be taken too seriously. Considering Senjumaru's Bankai simply allows her to conjure infinite Tanmono, it looks like they're just fun references for the knowing audience after all. That being said, I'm still not clear on what these Tanmono can do and how Senjumaru uses them. Like I said earlier, I'm not sure how what we see on the screen translates to her ability, unless here in Bankai, she really can do literally anything. And considering the mere activation of this Bankai was enough to send a tremor through the worlds, that's very possible. But with Lille, for example, she surrounds him with Tanmono that then turn into mirrors, forcing him to shoot himself. Presumably we also see Senjumaru using the ability to teleport between Tanmono of the same colour here as well, as she moves to evade each of the Schutzstaffel's attacks. What I'm not so clear on is how Senjumaru moves between the different Schutzstaffel members, considering they all have Tanmono of varying colours. If you watch the scene again, you can see that she kind of fades into each different room, as it were, appearing upon an otherwise blank piece of cloth, so presumably she can just move through the fabrics as she sees fit. When the Bankai is first activated, we see the red tapestries completely surrounding the Schutzstaffel. Whether they're then actually cut off from each other physically, or if it's all an illusion is hard to say, but they're all ensnared within her world either way. Presumably at this point, Senjumaru is free to manipulate each of them as she sees fit. That being said, it can't all be an illusion, as the Tanmono themselves appear to be very real, especially if we take into account what the ability of her Bankai actually is, according to this new information. Essentially, to cut a long story short, Senjumaru's Bankai separates the Schutzstaffel from one another, whether that's physically or not, and she then seals each of them within a tapestry, using theatrics and power that reference these characters' futures. But again, this part seems to just be a total coincidence, and just a reference for readers of the source material. I don't think it's implied anywhere now that Senjumaru nor her Bankai has any kind of foresight capability or anything to do with destiny and fate. There is one other thing to consider as well. All of this that we see in episode 26 is just one ability of her Bankai, Shide no Rokushiki Ukimon no Hata, which feels tailor-made to defeat the Schutzstaffel. Presumably, when she first used her Bankai, she conjured an infinite number of Tanmono, which is what we see when the gigantic loom appears and that red piece of cloth goes rolling forwards, and then used this power, which trapped each Quincy in their own domain within the Bankai itself. It's possible we will still learn a bit more about the Bankai when Part 3 arrives, since it is still active at the moment. The last we saw of it, each Schutzstaffel member had been imprisoned in their own personal Tanmono, but we know from the trailers that Uryu somehow escapes and does battle with Senjumaru while the Bankai is still active. They are still surrounded by that crimson. Perhaps we'll even get to see another of its possible abilities in action, but for now, we'll just have to wait on that front. But that's it for the new information given to us on Shutara Senjumaru's Zanpakuto Shigarami, both its Shikai and its Bankai. Now that we have how this Zanpakuto works mostly laid bare for us, what do you think? How do you feel about Senjumaru's Zanpakuto? Do you like its Shikai ability? Do you like its Bankai ability? Now we know what Shigarami can do, now we know what Shotatsu Karagara Shigarami no Tsuji can do. Are they as powerful as you first initially thought? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts and feelings about Senjumaru's Zanpakuto and how we've seen it being used so far down in the comments below. And how else do you think it might get used in future episodes to come? Once again, a huge thank you to Bleach_KRKRK and Arturo Plateado for both getting this information and then compiling in a very digestible way over on Reddit. I really do appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed these last couple of videos looking at this information. And as always, guys, I want to end by saying a massive thank you and giving a huge shout out to everyone supporting me over on Patreon. I really do appreciate each and every one of you so very much. It really does mean the absolute world to me. And if you want to support me over on Patreon as well, if you like what I do here over on YouTube, you can do just that to get your name in the credits like this and to get every single video I release absolutely ad-free. Alright guys, but until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.